Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. I'm Mr. Strange, and today I've got 4 stories that, well, let's just say they're not your typical high school stories that you think. These aren't just one made-up story. These are real things that happened to some kids in high schools. So, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like this video for more. Let's get to it. The first story comes from a guy named Marcus, who graduated from Jefferson High about 3 years ago. Marcus was this quiet kid, really into science, always had his head in a book. Smart as hell, but kind of awkward socially. The kind of guy who'd rather spend lunch in the chemistry lab than deal with the cafeteria drama. His junior year, they got this new chemistry teacher, Mr. Kellerman. Mid-40s, divorced, lived alone in this little apartment across town. At first, everyone loved the guy. He was young for a teacher, made chemistry actually interesting, and he seemed to really care about his students' success. Marcus especially clicked with him. They'd stay after school working on advanced experiments, talking about college plans, that sort of thing. But then things started getting weird. It started small. Mr. Kellerman would make these offhand comments about Marcus's appearance. "You're looking tired today, Marcus. Are you eating enough? Or that's a nice shirt. It really brings out your eyes." Marcus brushed it off at first. The guy was just being friendly, right? Then came the gifts. A book about advanced chemistry that made me think of you. A coffee mug with some science joke on it. Nothing too crazy, but enough to make Marcus a little uncomfortable. When Marcus mentioned it to his parents, they just said it was nice that a teacher was taking such an interest in his education. The real turning point came during a field trip to the university chemistry lab. Marcus was riding back on the bus when he felt someone sit down next to him. It was Mr. Kellerman, even though all the other teachers were sitting up front with the driver. "Marcus," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about your college applications." Marcus hadn't had any conversation about college applications. He'd barely spoken to Kellerman that week. "I think you should consider staying local," Kellerman continued, his voice getting lower. "There's a community college nearby. You could live at home, save money. I could even tutor you privately. We could spend a lot more time together." The way he said together made Marcus's skin crawl. He mumbled something about needing to sleep and pretended to doze off, but he could feel Kellerman's eyes on him for the entire 2-hour ride back. After that, things escalated quickly. Marcus would find notes in his locker, not signed, but written in Kellerman's distinctive handwriting. Things like, "Saw you at the grocery store yesterday. You looked good in those jeans," or, "Your hair looks nice when you don't use so much gel." Marcus started avoiding the chemistry lab, making excuses to skip after-school sessions. But Kellerman wasn't letting go that easily. He'd call Marcus to his desk during class, standing way too close while explaining assignments. He'd find reasons to touch Marcus's shoulder or hand. Once, while Marcus was writing on the board, Kellerman stood behind him and whispered, "You have beautiful handwriting. Very delicate fingers." The breaking point came during parent-teacher conferences. Marcus's mom went alone because his dad was working late. According to her, Kellerman spent the entire meeting talking about how special Marcus was, how he had such a bright future, and how important it was that Marcus had proper guidance during this vulnerable time in his development. But here's where it gets really disturbing. Halfway through the meeting, Kellerman pulled out a folder. A thick folder, full of photos. They were all of Marcus. Pictures taken at school, but also around town. Marcus walking to his car after school. Marcus at the public library. Marcus through the window of his bedroom, which was on the 2nd floor. "I like to document my students' progress," Kellerman had said with this creepy smile. "Marcus is particularly photogenic." Marcus's mom grabbed the folder and ran. She went straight to the principal's office the next morning. But when they searched Kellerman's classroom, everything was gone. The photos, any evidence, it was like it never existed. But the story doesn't end there. Because Marcus started getting phone calls at home. Heavy breathing, sometimes whispered words he couldn't quite make out. They traced the calls back to a payphone 3 blocks from Kellerman's apartment. The school board launched an investigation, but without concrete evidence, they couldn't fire him. They just transferred him to another school, in another district, where he could start fresh with a whole new group of students. Marcus graduated early and went to college on the other side of the state. But 2 years later, he got a Facebook friend request. No profile picture, just a name. K teaching. The profile was blank except for one post, a photo of Marcus's dorm building, taken from the parking lot below. The caption read, "Distance makes the heart grow fonder. See you soon." Marcus changed his phone number, changed his name on social media. He ended up changing his major from chemistry to something completely different. Because every time he walked into a lab, every time he smelled those chemicals, he remembered that voice whispering in his ear. The scariest part about Marcus's story, Kellerman is still teaching. He's moved schools 4 times in the past 5 years. Always the same pattern. Gets a little too close to certain students, parents complain. He gets quietly transferred before anything can be proven. He's out there right now, in some classroom, looking at some kid the way he looked at Marcus. Alright, so that was story 1. Story 2 is, it's different. It's about Emma's experience. A female girl at Westfield High in suburban Chicago. This happened just last year, in March 2024. Emma was a junior at Westfield High. It's one of those big suburban schools, about 2,500 students. Middle-class neighborhood, good test scores, sends lots of kids to decent colleges. The kind of place where the biggest problems are usually vaping in the bathrooms and cheating on tests. But social media has changed everything about high school, and what happened at Westfield shows you just how dangerous that can be. It started with a TikTok. Some sophomore named Brandon Cross. He was one of those kids who was always trying to get attention, always causing drama. He posted a TikTok that was meant to be a joke. It was him in his bedroom, wearing all black, with some angry music playing in the background. The caption said something like, "Don't come to school tomorrow if you want to live." Now, Brandon claimed later that he was just copying some meme he'd seen. He said he wasn't serious, that it was just dark humor, that everyone was being overdramatic. But here's the thing about jokes like that in 2024, nobody's laughing. The TikTok got shared, and shared again. Within a few hours, half the school had seen it. Parents started getting screenshots from their kids. Emma's mom called her at like 11 p.m., asking if she felt safe at school. But instead of reporting it to adults, instead of getting proper help, the students at Westfield decided to handle it themselves. And that's where everything went wrong. See, there was this group of students, mostly seniors, mostly athletes, who decided they were going to protect the school. Led by this guy Connor Murphy, captain of the football team. Connor got it in his head that the administration wasn't taking the threat seriously enough. The school had said they were investigating, that they'd spoken to Brandon, that there was no credible threat. But Connor didn't believe them. So he organized what he called a student safety patrol. It started small, just Connor and his friends keeping an eye out for Brandon, making sure he wasn't carrying anything dangerous. But it escalated fast. They started following Brandon between classes. They started going through his locker when he wasn't around. They recruited more students, and suddenly you had like 30 kids who thought they were protecting the school by stalking this one sophomore. Brandon, meanwhile, was getting death threats on social media. Kids were posting his address, his parents' phone numbers. Someone spray-painted "school shooter" on his car. The kid looked terrified every day, jumping at loud noises, eating lunch alone in the bathroom. But Connor's group wasn't satisfied with just watching Brandon. They wanted to do more. This is where the story gets really dark. Connor somehow got access to the school's emergency alert system. Emma never found out exactly how, whether he hacked it or got someone's password or what. But on March 15th, around 10:30 in the morning, every phone in Westfield High got an emergency alert. Active shooter in building. This is not a drill. Lockdown immediately. The chaos was instant and absolute. Teachers started barricading doors. Kids were crying and calling their parents. Everyone was trying to hide under desks or in closets. The panic was real. Nobody knew it was fake. But here's the thing. Connor had sent the alert because he'd seen Brandon walking toward the main office with a backpack, and Connor's paranoid brain decided this was it. This was the attack. He thought he was saving everyone by triggering the lockdown. Except Brandon was just going to the office because his counselor had called him down. The backpack had his lunch and his textbooks. So now you've got 2,500 students and staff thinking there's an active shooter, going through all the terror and trauma of a real lockdown, while the shooter is sitting in the guidance counselor's office talking about his class schedule. Emma was in calculus when the alert came through. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, immediately locked the door and started pushing desks against it. Emma and her classmates squeezed into the corner furthest from the door and windows. They turned off the lights and sat in darkness, listening to sirens getting closer and closer. She was texting her mom, telling her she loved her, thinking these might be the last messages she ever sent. Kids around her were hyperventilating, crying, praying. Someone threw up from stress. The smell of fear sweat was overwhelming. They sat like that for 45 minutes. During those 45 minutes, Connor's safety patrol was hunting through the school for Brandon. They'd split up into groups, going classroom to classroom, thinking they were helping the police locate the shooter. Except they were just traumatizing more students and teachers, pounding on locked doors, shouting, making everyone think the shooter was right outside their room. The Real police arrived and found nothing. No shooter, no weapons, no threat. Just a school full of traumatized people, and one sophomore crying in the counselor's office because he couldn't understand why everyone thought he was dangerous. It took hours to sort out what had really happened. Connor admitted to sending the fake alert, but he insisted he was trying to protect people. Brandon was cleared of any wrongdoing. The investigation showed his original TikTok was stupid, but not a genuine threat. But the damage was done. The psychological trauma was unbelievable. Kids who had gone through that lockdown, thinking they were about to die, saying goodbye to their families, hiding in dark rooms for almost an hour, they didn't just bounce back. Some transferred schools. Others needed therapy. Parents kept their kids home for weeks. And the social dynamics at Westfield were completely destroyed. Brandon's family ended up moving to a different state because the harassment never stopped. Connor got expelled and faced criminal charges for false reporting. The safety patrol members were suspended and became social outcasts. The worst part was the realization of how quickly fear can turn a community against itself. These were kids who'd grown up together, been in classes together for years, and within a few days they'd become a mob hunting one of their own based on a TikTok joke. The school district ended up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on new security measures, mental health resources, social media monitoring. They brought in FBI agents to talk to students about recognizing real threats versus social media drama. What really changed was the atmosphere. Westfield had always felt safe, friendly, like a place where everyone knew everyone. After March 15th, there was suspicion everywhere. Kids were reporting each other for dark jokes, side-eye glances, wearing the wrong color shirts. Teachers were jumpy. Parents were paranoid. This third story, man, this one's tough to tell. It comes from a guy named Danny, who graduated from Riverside High about 4 years ago. Danny was a wrestler, not the biggest guy on the team, but he was scrappy. Had that determination that coaches love, you know? He'd been wrestling since middle school, dreamed of getting a college scholarship. Riverside had one of the best wrestling programs in the state. They'd won championships 3 years running, had multiple guys go Division I. The head coach, Coach Morrison, was like a local celebrity. Former Olympic alternate, tough as nails, the kind of guy who could turn any kid into a warrior. But success like that doesn't come without sacrifice. And at Riverside, that sacrifice was more than just sweat and dedication. Danny's junior year, he finally made varsity. It was everything he'd worked for. The respect, the recognition, the possibility of a scholarship. But making varsity meant more than just competing at a higher level. It meant becoming part of the family, as Coach Morrison called it. The first sign something was off came during summer training. The varsity guys had these special sessions. Just them, no JV, no freshmen. They'd disappear into the old equipment room behind the gym for hours at a time. When they came out, they were different. Quieter. More intense. It's just mental conditioning, explained Tyler, the team captain. Morrison teaches us techniques you can't learn from any book. But you have to prove you're committed first. The proving came in the form of challenges. Not wrestling matches. These were different. Tests of pain tolerance, fear management, loyalty. Danny thought he understood what that meant until his first varsity sleepover. The team had these mandatory overnight training sessions once a month. Parents thought it was team bonding, watching wrestling videos, eating pizza, that sort of thing. And that's what it was for the first few hours. But after the lights went out, the real activities began. Initiation never ends, Morrison told the new varsity members. Every month, you prove you belong here. You prove you're willing to do whatever it takes to win. The challenges started simple. Physical endurance tests that left guys exhausted and shaking. Eating contests with combinations of food that made them violently sick. psychological games designed to break down their inhibitions and rebuild them as a unit. But as the season progressed, the challenges got darker. One night where they had to participate in what Morrison called trust exercises. The room would be completely dark, and pairs of wrestlers would take turns inflicting pain on each other, punching, choking, twisting limbs, while the victim had to remain completely silent. Any sound, any sign of weakness, and both participants would be punished. The punishment was always worse than the original challenge. Another night, they brought in this homeless guy Morrison had found downtown. They told the team he was a volunteer, someone who wanted to help them train. But the way they talked about him, the way they looked at him, Danny knew something was very wrong. "He's going to help us practice our aggression," Morrison explained. "Sometimes you need to learn what it feels like to truly dominate another human being." Danny won't say exactly what happened that night. Says some memories are better left buried. But it involved the whole team, and that homeless guy was never seen around town again. The worst part was how normal it all seemed to the other guys. Like they'd been conditioned to accept this behavior as part of being a champion. They'd joke about it at school, make references that only they understood. They developed this code language for talking about their training sessions. Danny started having problems. Panic attacks. He'd wake up in cold sweats, feeling like he was suffocating. His grades started slipping, he lost weight. His parents thought he was using drugs. But the team was winning. More than winning, they were dominant. Guys who'd never placed higher than third in tournaments were suddenly taking first. Wrestlers who'd struggled with confidence were destroying opponents twice their size. Morrison called it mental conditioning. But Danny was starting to think it was something else entirely. The breaking point came during the regional championships. Danny was having the best season of his life, but he was falling apart inside. The night before his biggest match, Morrison pulled him aside. "You've been distracted lately," Morrison said, questioning the program. "That's not acceptable." He led Danny to the equipment room, where the rest of the varsity team was waiting. They'd set up a circle of chairs, like some kind of tribunal. "Danny's been having doubts," Morrison announced. "He's forgotten what it means to be part of this family. Tonight, we remind him." What happened next? Danny's never told anyone the full story. Not his parents, not his therapist, not even here. All we know is that it involved the entire team, it lasted for hours, and it left him with scars that still haven't fully healed. The next day, Danny forfeited his match, walked off the mat, turned in his singlet, and quit the team. He told his parents he was injured, told his friends he'd lost interest. Never explained the real reason to anyone. But Morrison wasn't done with him. For the rest of senior year, Danny was terrorized. Not openly. Morrison was too smart for that. But there were incidents. Danny's car tires were slashed. His locker was broken into, his homework destroyed. Someone started a rumor that he was gay, that he'd quit the team because he couldn't handle being around other guys in the locker room. The wrestling team avoided him completely. Guys who'd been his friends for years acted like he didn't exist. It was like he'd never been part of their world at all. Danny graduated and went to college across the country. He never wrestled again, never even talked about the sport. He changed his major 3 times, struggled with depression, had trouble maintaining relationships. But he thought he'd left it all behind. Until his sophomore year of college, when he got a package in the mail. No return address, no note. Just a DVD with his name written on it. The video was from one of those late-night training sessions. Danny was in it, participating in things he'd tried to forget. But more importantly, so was everyone else. The whole team, doing things that would end careers and destroy lives if they ever came to light. A week later, Danny got a phone call. "I hope you're doing well in college," Morrison said. "It's important that former team members stay connected to the program. Stay loyal. We wouldn't want anyone to get the wrong impression about what we do here." That was 2 years ago. Danny still gets calls every few months. Just checking in. Making sure he remembers where his loyalties lie. Reminding him that some secrets are meant to be kept forever. The Riverside wrestling team is still winning championships. Morrison's still coaching. And every year, a new group of kids joins the varsity team, eager to prove they have what it takes to be champions. Danny's working with a therapist now, trying to process what happened to him. But he's terrified of speaking out, because that DVD is still out there. And Morrison made it very clear what would happen if Danny ever decided to break his silence. Some victories come at a price. And at Riverside High, that price is paid in silence. The last story comes from a guy named Louise. He graduated from Roosevelt High in Ohio back in 2019, and what happened there during his senior year. Man, it still gives me chills when I think about it. So Louise was always the science kid, you know? AP chemistry, physics, the whole 9 yards. He was planning to major in chemical engineering at Ohio State. The chemistry teacher, Mr. Brennan, had been at Roosevelt for like 23 years. Everyone loved the guy. He made chemistry fun, did cool demonstrations, really cared about his students. But here's the thing about Mr. Brennan that Louise didn't know until it was too late. The man had been slowly losing his mind. It started small. Around October of senior year, Mr. Brennan began acting different. He'd forget students' names he'd known for years. He'd start a sentence and just trail off, staring at nothing. Sometimes he'd be in the middle of explaining molecular bonds and suddenly ask what day it was. Louise figured the guy was just stressed. Teachers work crazy hours, right? Plus, Mr. Brennan's wife had died the year before from cancer. Everyone cut him some slack. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in November. Louise had 6th period AP chemistry, and they were working on a lab involving concentrated acids, hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, some nasty stuff that could eat through skin in seconds. Standard procedure was that Mr. Brennan would handle all the concentrated chemicals himself, then give students the diluted versions to work with. But that day, Mr. Brennan wasn't himself at all. Louise walked into class and immediately knew something was wrong. Mr. Brennan was standing at his desk, just staring at a beaker of clear liquid. His hands were shaking, and he kept muttering to himself. When students tried to talk to him, he'd look at them like he'd never seen them before. "Who are you?" he asked Emma Rodriguez, a student he'd taught for 3 years. "How did you get in my house?" The whole class went dead silent. This wasn't just a bad day. Something was seriously wrong. But here's where it gets horrifying. Instead of getting help, instead of calling the office, the students they didn't know what to do. They were 17, 18 years old. They'd never dealt with anything like this before. So they tried to continue the lab. Big mistake. Mr. Brennan started handing out chemicals, but he wasn't reading the labels. He wasn't following any safety protocols. Louise watched in horror as Mr. Brennan gave Jessica Torres a beaker full of what was supposed to be diluted hydrochloric acid for her experiment. Except it wasn't diluted. Jessica didn't know. She trusted her teacher. She started her experiment exactly like she was supposed to, measuring out the diluted acid with a plastic pipette. The concentrated acid ate through the pipette in seconds. Then it splashed onto her hands. Jessica's hands started smoking. The acid was literally dissolving her skin. She's screaming, running around the classroom, and Mr. Brennan is just standing there, looking confused, asking why everyone is so upset. Louise and 2 other students grabbed Jessica and shoved her hands under the emergency eye wash station. But the damage was already done. The acid had eaten through skin down to the bone in some places. Some of her fingers looked like they'd been dipped in lava. But that's not even the worst part. While they're trying to help Jessica, while someone's calling 911, while the whole classroom is in chaos, Mr. Brennan picks up a large beaker of concentrated sulfuric acid. The stuff that can blind you if the vapors get in your eyes, and he starts walking toward the class. "Everyone needs to drink their medicine," he's saying. The voices told me everyone needs their medicine. That's when pure terror set in. This wasn't just an accident anymore. Their teacher, this man they'd trusted, had completely snapped, and he was coming toward them with a beaker of acid that could kill them. 3 students, Louise, David, Kim, and Tyler, they rushed Mr. Brennan. They tackled him to the ground, and the beaker went flying. It shattered against the whiteboard, and acid splashed everywhere. The chemical smell was overwhelming. Paint was bubbling and peeling off the walls wherever the acid hit. They held Mr. Brennan down while he kept screaming about voices and medicine, and how everyone was in his house uninvited. Mr. Brennan was stronger than they expected, fighting like a wild animal, biting and scratching. The paramedics got there maybe 10 minutes later, but those 10 minutes felt like hours. Jessica was rushed to the hospital. She ended up needing multiple surgeries and skin grafts. She lost 2 fingers on her left hand and has permanent nerve damage in both hands. She was planning to be a pianist. Mr. Brennan was committed to a psychiatric facility. Turned out he'd been having a complete mental breakdown for months. Early onset dementia triggered by the stress of losing his wife. Plus he'd been self-medicating with alcohol and prescription drugs. The combination had caused severe psychotic episodes. The school tried to cover it up at first. They didn't want the publicity. But Jessica's parents sued, and the whole story came out. Roosevelt High had to completely overhaul their safety protocols. They installed panic buttons in every classroom, required 2 teachers for any lab involving dangerous chemicals, mandatory mental health screenings for all staff. Jessica ended up dropping out and getting her GED.